Sam and Max, our favourite freelance police, are back. And yes, we've been given exactly what we've all been asking for, a VR game. And yes, I know Steve Purcell, creator of the series, that he is involved to some extent, but I just question the enthusiasm that a point-and-click adventure enthusiast would actually have for a game like this. Anyway, I want to talk a bit about this game, also about LucasArts IPs, all of those old school ones like Monkey Island, and see what's kind of going on with the genre, so let's take a bit of a look. Hi, Estelden here. Was anyone expecting this? I know I certainly wasn't. I thought Sam and Max as a series was pretty much dead and buried, and if we were going to see something again with our furry friends, it was going to be something to do with the new Telltale studio. It was going to be a new game from them. As we know, Telltale have kind of risen from the ashes, and they're making games like the sequel to The Wolf Among Us 2, I believe it is. So they've got a bit going on, but Sam and Max itself, the new title, this time it's virtual. And I can say that this is very much a VR game. It's all focused on that. It's not just like a spoof or a look back on the original Sam and Max, where the original guys did go to like a virtual reality world. It was a fun part of the game. No, this is very much just a VR title. The studio behind it, Happy Giant, I've had a look into them, and they are made up of some LucasArts ex-employees and some veterans from there. So originally when I saw it, I was like, Jesus Christ, there is not a chance that this is going to be anything more than a gimmicky VR game. But at least it has some decent names attached. I mean, Steve Purcell is involved. I will say that any kind of projects like this, we only have to look at like Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, where they had the original creator, Brian Mitsoda, involved, and then they've actually fired him quite recently, but he was involved and they were using him in the marketing and anything. So I'm always a little bit skeptical when a studio has the original creator involved and they're referred to as a consultant, because often it just does mean that they're pretty much just there for marketing reasons and not much more. But apparently the guys involved, Mike Levine, the CEO of Happy Giant, he has a relationship with Steve Purcell. There's some other guys in there who did work at LucasArts, so at least that's a little bit promising. I can say that the trailer itself didn't really hype me, and I don't think it hyped a lot of people who are interested in Sam and Max either. From what we saw, essentially you're like a police cadet and you're in training with Sam and Max. So you're playing in first person, it's you. You're not actually playing as Sam and Max, which I suppose makes sense in a VR context. I'm certainly not any sort of enthusiast with VR games or anything of that nature, but it does seem that you're just playing as this random person. You're being trained by Sam and Max, and you'll start out by fighting this big monster, this big creature that we saw in the trailer. From there, you're going to be doing some more police training. It's going to be more generic stuff, like I saw in the trailer where you're just like shooting cockroaches into the cupboard. And I thought, really, is this like the best you can come up with when you're hyping up a new game? Surely not. I mean, it was kind of funny in the context of the larger reveal where they explained that, yeah, you're shooting cockroaches, that's your training. That is kind of funny. But when they showed it off in the snippet trailer, it looked like that was the actual gameplay and it looked a little bit lazy. So I think on the marketing front, they could probably do a better job of getting that across in the initial snippet kind of trailer, the one they're going to get out to the most people, because that's going to be the broader audience who are going to check that out, and you really don't want to turn them off, especially not in VR where it's already got a very small user base to begin with. There is some more info though. I'm on a Sam and Max enthusiast website, samandmax.co.uk, and I was able to find out a little bit more information, and it did make me a little bit more optimistic of like the story side of things and what you're actually going to be doing. I was worried it was going to be very much just kill this big monster, do some training around the office, and then you're pretty much done with the game. And if you watch the trailer, and if you watch like the 2-minute expanded on kind of thing that they did at Gamescom as well, that really seemed to be all it was. But then I read whatever this is, it's like an interview or it's some more details, and they talk about a whole bunch of different things you do. So you'll be doing graded courses inside an abandoned theme park. They'll be putting their skills to the tests around the whole neighborhood as well. So it sounds like there's actually going to be a few locations, and I think they should have got that across in the trailer. My worry with anything related to VR, at least for the time being, is that VR is just going to be, it's going to be like a showcase where rather than playing a full-fledged game, like something like Resident Evil 7, which is a game in its own right, but you can also play it in VR, you can get like a full experience. Most of the VR-only games seem to be these short snippets of a game where you'll do some sort of gimmick. It might be kind of cool for what it is, but you're not going to walk away and think, gee, that was like a real massive game that I played there. It was great as a game. It's really only good as a VR experience, and that is always the worry. Especially with something like Sam & Max, which is certainly, it's not a VR game. Like, it's a series that people played for the story, the characters, maybe some of the puzzles. So when you make it about VR, I just have to wonder, who is this for? Is it for the original fans of the series? Because a lot of them, they're old people like me. Like, I'm probably in the younger demographic of people who like Sam & Max. This came out a year after I was born. I played it on, like, DOS emulators and stuff years later on PC and had a really good time with it. But the actual guys who grew up with Sam & Max, even the people who like the Telltale games, we're all fucking adults. So whether that audience transfers over, and there are a lot of Sam & Max enthusiasts who also happen to have a VR headset, they're absolutely excited for something like this, I just don't know. Maybe Half-Life Alyx, it brought a lot of people over. I mean, there's probably a lot of guys who do like Half-Life who do also like Sam & Max. They came out in that golden age, at least to me, late 90s PC gaming with some of the early 2000s. Half-Life was in there, Half-Life 2 was in there. So maybe there is some crossover. But we're really just going to have to see. But I will say that someone who loves point-and-click adventures, loves that traditional aspect, I question if they're going to find that here. Happy Giant, the studio, they might have ex-LucasArts employees, but it's very much just like an augmentation studio where they don't specialize in making standalone video games. They seem to do a lot of support work, helping other studios, doing a bit of VR work and everything there. So I'm sure they're experts in the VR field, but in the actual video game world, that remains to be seen, and we'll have to see what they come up with. It's coming early 2021, so early next year. I don't think it's going to have a lot of polish because looking at like the character models, everything that's going on there, they really do look like recycled Telltale aspects. And I've seen a lot of people say the same thing, do a bit of like correlation of actually showing both, like the trailer animations and then showing the original Telltale animations, so from the first 3 seasons of the Telltale Sam & Max series. And they do look extremely similar. Maybe there's some minor changes, but it sounds like a deal might have been made where they've been able to use a lot of the same assets because they just don't look very original. I'll say that if I do get a VR headset by that time, which is probably unlikely, I'm not like super excited about all this stuff. I'm much more of an old school type of gamer. But if I do, I would definitely at least check this out because at least I get Sam & Max again. And I think that's the mindset of most people. I've seen most people excited by these news, not being negative or pessimistic about it. They've essentially just said, oh, awesome, we've got Sam & Max again, our furry friends are back. But they're not really saying like, whoa, this game, this particular game, this time it's virtual, this looks fantastic. I really haven't seen any really good feedback about it. I mean, most people are kind of saying the dialogue looks a little bit weak, everything looks a bit rough around the edges, I'm just not sure, but at least Sam & Max are back. So that's basically all it's really come down to, and I do kind of think that the reason we're getting this is because Happy Giant wanted to make a VR game of their own. They know Steve Purcell, they've got a lot of enthusiasm in the team when it comes to these characters, and they thought, well, why don't we just do this? We can get it out there. We know a lot of fans who enjoyed the Telltale games, they haven't had anything new for a while. Maybe this will sell just because we're bringing them back, even if we're doing VR and not something traditional. So I suppose that's where the audience, that's where the logic comes from, but it is a bit of a shame that after all these years, because we've been waiting so long for a Sam & Max title, that we have to apparently get excited about a VR title and not something traditional. It'd be nice if we got something that's brand new in the point-and-click genre as well, rather than just this. What makes me a little bit sad, I guess, is just the state of the LucasArts IPs. So I'm talking about the Monkey Island, Sam & Max 2, but also like Day of the Tentacle, Maniac Mansion, Full Throttle, Grim Fandango. There's so many of those classic series that are just sitting there gathering dust. We've had a few remasters, like Tim Schafer's Double Fine. They released Full Throttle, Day of the Tentacle, Grim Fandango. I played it on Switch like a year or so ago. It was nice to revisit it, but we just never get anything new from those IPs, and it's just a shame that Disney have all these games sitting there. They don't give a fuck because they're raking in the Star Wars money, they're raking in all the Marvel money, all of that. So games like Monkey Island, all those IPs, there's probably like one lawyer sitting in the back room somewhere. He's probably like the only employee who even knows about all of this stuff. The only employees are aware of it all. So it is a shame that the conversation just can't get started to get these IPs back in good hands, get new games coming out in the point-and-click genre with some of these well-known favourites. I saw a while ago there was a petition to get Monkey Island back to Ron Gilbert. I can pretty much say that no one from Disney would have seen it, at least no one who could seriously make a decision. So things like that, like I appreciate the audience trying to do something, and sometimes it's all you can do, but I really just don't think those things ever seem to work, and it is a shame. I would love to see Monkey Island go back to Ron Gilbert. I'll say that Ron Gilbert is actually making a new point-and-click adventure. This isn't like related to Sam and Max, but it is really cool that Ron Gilbert's going to be making another game. Whether it's a sequel to Thimbleweed Park, we're going to find out. But he had like a job listing online where he said, yep, we need someone new. Our team's back to work making our next game. Mentioned it was a point-and-click adventure, traditional, so I'm really excited about that. That's something I'm going to be paying attention to. And back to the IPs though, the only thing that gives me like a little sense of optimism is that Double Fine Productions, or Studios, whatever they're called now, they were brought out by Microsoft. So Tim Schafer, he's working for Microsoft now, they're a Microsoft studio, and they've had a lot of history remastering point-and-click games. When they're not working on Psychonauts, it has been like the Full Throttle remaster, the Day of the Tentacle remaster. So I wonder if, were they bought out to keep making 3D platformers, or is it possible that it was their history with point-and-click? Those remasters, maybe they sold really well and Microsoft saw, hey, there's a bit of an audience here. And Tim Schafer has been a bit of a guru, at least back in the day, when it comes to those games. Created Grim Fandango, which is a big favourite of mine and many other people. Is that why that Double Fine were brought out? And I can say that even though with Microsoft, I know they're pretty much just focused on the money, they're focused on the Xbox stuff. I'm sure they don't really care about point-and-click adventures. But is there a chance that given they're quite the juggernaut, they're big enough to start the conversation with someone like Disney to get those IPs back? Even though they're not going to be like huge system sellers, I'm sure, could there be a niche there that could then fit for Microsoft's Game Pass, where they can bring some more point-and-click adventures to that service and then really bring in that audience to get them into the ecosystem? If we saw something like a new Grim Fandango, if we saw something like a new Monkey Island or one of those types of games with Double Fine, which I think would be really nice. I think we're kind of missing that. There's just been so many of these walking simulators. It's really hard now to actually distinguish what is a point-and-click adventure, what is a walking sim, because it's just been combined a little bit. It's kind of like in role-playing games where you get so many titles now where people say, oh, that's an RPG because there was like a stat or two somewhere. But you have a look at the game and you dive in and you go, not really, it's just like an action-y adventure type game. I think something like Assassin's Creed, where, yeah, they've thrown a few stats in there, but I wouldn't consider this like an RPG in the same making of something like Wasteland 3. It's just not really comparable. So point and clicks are kind of the same. There's a lot of point and click games, apparently, where you are just walking around. You might make like a dialogue choice, you might click on a few items in plain view, but you're not really doing puzzles. You're not solving anything really interesting, and it's nothing like, say, Monkey Island. So I do think it'd be really exciting if there was a way to get these point-and-click adventures back, get those old IPs back into circulation. Microsoft, they do have a really bad history with that, so I won't hold my breath. Banjo-Kazooie, all of those rare IPs, they've never really seen the light of day. Although we did have Battletoads come out recently, maybe that's like a ray of hope somewhere. So if they can do the same for Double Fine, get them on the point-and-click adventure bandwagon too, get them making some of those games, that would be really awesome. So Sam & Max, this time it's virtual. I don't think it's the game we've really been looking for. Maybe it'll be decent in its own right, but I think a lot of those original fans simply won't play it because you need to have a VR headset and you need to go down that whole road. You need like a beefy computer. Most people are just into like point and clicks and not into most other games. They probably don't need a really beefy computer. It probably doesn't take much to play Beyond a Still Sky or some indie developed point and click somewhere. You probably don't need like the latest NVIDIA graphics card for any of that. So we'll see what happens. I doubt it's going to be a major success. I can only hope that it leads to more Sam & Max games, more point and click adventures, and something decent in the future, something for us to kind of hang on to, and give us hope for what we're going to get in the future in this genre. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.